Dee Bliss was born or delivered unto Ramsay Street. Head went one way, the car went the other. What a way to go on your wedding day. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it hard. When I saw my face for the first time, and it was pretty badly smashed up, the abuse stops now. It stops with me.
Before we get stuck into today's conversation, I want to thank the official beauty partner of Just Tack, beautyboat.com. They have supported us from the very beginning, and they are stepping into this new era with us. Whether you are looking for Egyptian Magic Beauty Cream, the By Terry and Tan Luxe ranges, or their legendary Discovery boxes, they curate absolute Tier 1 products. For our long-time listeners, the legacy code is still active. Use BIN25, BIN25 at checkout for 25% off your entire order. Head to beautyboat.com today, and thank you for supporting the brands that support this platform. G'day, g'day, g'day. Welcome to Just Tack. I'm Madeleine West, and I'm your host, Takaya Honda. Now, I'm going to be trying something a little bit different this week in the intro. I'm trying to keep it a little bit shorter, but I want to put in a little bit of a life update at the start of each one, which maybe you like, maybe you don't, but I want you to let me know. Put in the comments or go to our Instagram or whatever and let me know, do you want me just to say like 2 sentences about the guest and go straight to the interview, or do you want to have a little bit of me talking about what's happened in the past week for me, or any other random topic like taxis, because that seemed to go off last week? But yeah, let me know, because I'm curious to hear what you guys want. For those people watching, you're about to see my hair grow instantaneously, because I go from this shorter hair to having long hair that's tied back in the interview, because I did the interview about a month ago, I'd say, pre-Tom heading overseas. Well, he didn't do any edits overseas, and I wanted the intro outros to be closer to when the release date is. So here I am. Now, the last month has been kind of hectic. I've been flying interstate pretty much for less than 24 hours each week, filming or rehearsing Play School, filming this other thing with an upcoming guest, which has all been a lot of fun, although tiring, and putting a lot of weight on Amy's shoulders here with Ari. But she's a trooper, and she's been doing really well. But right now, actually, the thing that's irking me is my tongue's really sore, which makes talking really hard. And the more I talk, the more it hurts. So I kind of don't want this intro to be any longer. So maybe I won't go into much to what's been happening in the last month, but it's been a lot. But then I've got one more Play School episode to film next week, and then I'm heading to Sydney again the week after for a Dementia Australia event, which will be a lot of fun. But that is literally, I'm in Sydney for 9 hours for that one. But it's a really good event to help launch, I think. Oh no, they're doing a live recording of their podcast, which if you haven't checked out, you should, called Hold the Moment. It's award-winning. It's very good. But yeah, let's get into this one. We covered the chaos of those iconic Neighbours returns, the fight for survivor's law, and how Madeleine built her entire identity again after a near-fatal accident. It's a raw, honest, great chat, and I've been looking forward to having it for such a long time. And if you want to help me continue bringing these unfiltered conversations week after week, please take 1 second right now and just hit the subscribe or follow button on whatever app you are using. Or, even better, come join us over on Patreon. It's a lot of fun, I hope. All right, let's get into it. I'm Just Takaya Honda, and this is Madeleine West. How many kids do you have now?
762. No. 7.
Wow.
It's number 7.
7.
Lucky 7. It's my menopause baby. But Tack, it doesn't matter how many you have. It could be 1 or 20. All you just need to strap yourself in and know, okay, my life is about to be turned upside down, given a good hard shake, my wallet emptied, and there's no apologies and there's no return policy. So
No, I've discussed this. Unfortunately, the terms and conditions were very explicit. No
can we
returns.
just put him back? No. But, you know, they're such a joy, and I guess at the end of the day, if we just switch it into the theme of biological urgings, it is our purpose to repopulate,
It is.
to reproduce, and some of us just get a bit too excited by that concept. Standing over here in the corner, waving my hand, and here we are. There used to be an old saying, I think it was a political idiom, that to have one for you, one for him, and one for Australia, or vice versa. And I've kind of gone, yep, well, one for me, one for him, and one of most of the islands in the Philippines, just to, cover off, just to
Oh, how old's your eldest?
20.
Wow.
That's 20 solid years of parenting.
And then the second youngest?
So 20, 17, 15, just about to turn 14, 11-year-old twins, and then my hallelujah surprise menopause baby that I thought was menopause, invariably wasn't.
Has it been nice to see the older kids interact with such a young sibling?
It's beautiful. The twins, I think, and my 13-year-old are the most heavily invested. For the older ones, it's very much, I've got my own thing going on. I'm a teenager, or I'm out there in the world now. I don't have time for this kind of thing.
Yep, understandable.
It's been quite an education for me, I suppose. I call it the grandmother effect. I'm getting to experience what it is kind of like for grandparents that, we've done all the kids and now we've got this little one. Of course, I don't get to hand mine back at the end of the day, which comes with its own benefits and pros and cons. But I think I'm a much slower parent. Yes, slower maybe because I'm a bit stupid for having 7 children, but slower definitely, like in the sense of slow cooking and slow eating and just slowing down and taking the time to be present and appreciating it, and how quickly I have the clarity of foresight to know this is going to go so fast. And I know with my others, we're also busy in, times are difficult, from economic strife to the pressures of work and keeping up with the Joneses. We're also busy, that it's really lovely to have this opportunity to go, this is just a moment that I can always work tomorrow. Work will always be there, but ask myself the big philosophical questions like, well, to what ends am I working? Well, it's to afford a certain lifestyle, but what does that lifestyle comprise? Is it owning a yacht, or is it having meaningful time with my loved ones? And invariably, of course, the answer is it's meaningful time with my loved ones. Well, does that need to have dollar signs attached to it for it to be meaningful? No, it doesn't. It's more about just being present. So I think I've finally come to the conclusion that I'm quite happy to live on a much stricter budget and invest more in the small things, which might just be walking in puddles, which we did yesterday. And of course, Bubs fell face first into a puddle, but that's another story. Or just watching the progress of a ladybug climbing up a flower, and just little tiny things, the little details of life that we so often miss when we're rushing from A to B.
It's just nice to hear.
It sounds so woo-woo, tack. And I'm in Byron, so of course I am. You're lucky there's no dream catchers or healing crystals in the background.
Oh, look, I know, you may not know, but Amy and I have a very strong connection to Byron. We both loved it ourselves. I proposed there. We got married there. We would love to live there. But it's difficult to move there, I'm sure, as you're aware.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of constraints. I love being here, but it's very difficult to work as an actor because it requires significant travel. And I am very distant from my extended family and a lot of my wonderful friendships, but I suppose I like that my kids are getting to grow up close to the ocean and close to the rainforest, and we're fostering a really healthy relationship with the natural world, with the hope that they'll appreciate just how precious it is.
I actually reached out to you initially because the survivor's law had just been passed, which was something you were advocating for quite a while, which is a huge moment, and I think a lot of people would be unaware of it too. And so I want to give a moment to it. Do you want to briefly explain what the survivor's law is?
Well, basically, it creates. Currently, there's been numerous loopholes in superannuation law, which will allow someone who's facing criminal charges to sequester their savings or property, art, etc., into their superannuation, which cannot be touched in a victim's compensation case. So what we saw was some of our most prolific pedophiles and sex criminals and criminals at large sequestering, having a whole bank of accountants and lawyers advising them and sequestering their lifetime earnings into their superannuation, which means when it came to bear that victims of their crimes finally made criminal or civil proceedings to reclaim their history, to seek justice, they weren't able to access that compensation, which meant that that person might serve their time or a prison sentence if that was applicable, and then come out and can return to their life, return to their savings. And this crime is heinous and far-reaching. It's 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys, and that's the reported cases, TAC. And we know that on average it takes 23 years for someone to report historical abuse. So those numbers, that means that anywhere you sit in a room, there's 2 of us sitting here, there's and I'd hate to say it, there's a very high chance that a number of our children will have this experience. And that has always brought that, looking at it that starkly brings it home. And often the most prolific, it most commonly happens intra-family, where it's within the family unit or in that immediate circle of the immediate environment. But the most prolific predators are those with money and influence, because that allows them access. And so these are people who have significant access to wealth, and it's extremely hard to report this crime. It's extremely hard to go through the legal process to seek justice. And so to get to the other side and have no access to compensation, aside from the pittance that is available in the public system, is galling and another hurdle, another obstacle to people reporting in the first place, because it looks hopeless. So this law will allow victims to access the superannuation payments and subsidies and contributions of people who are found guilty of perpetuating these crimes against them. So it is a significant change in the law. It was extremely important to me on many levels. Because I think it's important to acknowledge that this crime is very much a root cause of so many of the social ills that befall society at large. Society operates under a veil of silence when it comes to this issue because it's uncomfortable. It's a difficult conversation. No one wants to talk about it. But the very notion of a child being preyed on sexually by an adult is of itself not just heinous, but uncomfortable. So there are so many different outcomes of these particular crimes, whether it leads to a lifetime of social avoidance, inability to work, whether it leads to substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, violence in itself, whether it leads to criminality in the future. There are so many tangents, so many factors that need to be taken into consideration. These all cost the taxpayer. So whether it's that you're in long-term therapy to deal with what happened to you, whether it means that you spend your life on a pension because you're unable to work, these all have a monetary cost. And even seeking significant therapy, we know, is very, very expensive. So compensation isn't a gift to a victim saying, here, now you can go and buy a house and fill your bathtub with $100 bills and roll around in it. It's actually saying, this will give you the tools to help you heal. And not just you, but your access to the tools, and for your family, for your community at large. So we're moving towards a better society at large. So that was really important to me. And also the preventative angle. Prevention is always better than cure. Dealing with these issues after the fact, more often than not, it's too late. And if someone who has significant savings, or whether it's houses, art, whatever they have in their super, knowing that they will be publicly pilloried for what they've done, but B, that their savings and therefore their family's financial future will be at risk, might just be enough to stop them acting out on these urges and desires in the first place. So it was a big win for me, and again a demonstration that if you, and it's not for everyone, but if you can be brave enough to report, if you can be brave enough to reach out and make those who are responsible for what has happened to you face the full weight of the law, then you're not just rewriting your own history, you're potentially protecting kids into the future. I mean, it's public knowledge now, but I did wear a wire and confront the predator in my own case. And when the police first approached me about that, I was very much dead against it, that it was far too triggering. This is going to be too difficult. I haven't seen this person for 30 years. And then I learned that he had grandchildren. And that was the turning point for me.
Oh.
That's when I went, the abuse stops now. It stops with me. And now he's in prison. So he can't get his grubby little hands on anyone.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the law. I think that's huge, and I don't think anyone would have thought that was a thing.
Yeah.
That people could hide their money and assets in super, and the craziness of that being possible. Because you have people who are living with this for their life, and then you've got people who have at least gotten away for a certain period of time with it. Then they've gotten caught, and then they had been able to still feel like they were getting away with it to some degree by being able to hide this stuff, which is outrageous to me.
It's absurd.
Again, well done on your work. I can understand how difficult it is. So, having to talk about it and advocate for it in my own small way, I understand it because I do a lot of work with Dementia Australia because my mum and my nan both passed away with different forms of Alzheimer's. And, I love doing the emceeing and work I do with them, but it is difficult because I'm having to face something each time that I'm doing it. But I know that the outcome is important, and that's a very different version of what you're having to do. So I commend that you've given your voice, your face, and your profile to it because it is important. It does help, and this is a case where there's been a win, which it must give you a little bit of joy out of the whole thing to be able to know that you're helping the future.
It is important to tell our story. It is important to show up and to show what is possible and to support it, because even if it compels one other person to stop you, and this does happen to me all the time, and it's heartbreaking, but I delight in it. Someone who will just reach out and touch your arm in a supermarket and say, I know you and I know what you do, and I just want to say thank you. And you can see in their eyes that they're living it as well. And it happened to me yesterday at Kmart when I was shopping for a winter jacket for Bubs. And a lovely woman, she would have been in her 70s, stopped me, and there were tears welling in her eyes when she said, I just want to say thank you because it happened to me. And when it happened to me, there was nowhere to go. And if there's people like you who are out there saying this is possible, then it makes me feel better in myself. And I knew she's never spoken to anyone about this. And just getting that off her chest for that moment and being seen, and I gave her a hug, which in itself demonstrates that you're not flawed, you're not broken, you're not to blame, despite what the perpetrator might have told you, despite what society might have told you that there's something wrong with you. You've been walking around bearing a cross that was never yours to carry. You did nothing wrong. This was done to you. And it wasn't right and it wasn't fair. It was enough for her to walk away feeling lighter and brighter and maybe a bit more hopeful. And that having that opportunity is a gift. And I've had now to date, since I first told my story, close to 50,000 disclosures of abuse, ranging from children up to adults. And that's just me. Yes, in my work as an online safety educator, but just walking around or receiving a DM in Facebook or Instagram, that's significant. And it just goes to show how big this problem is. And until we start talking about it and destigmatizing it and pointing out that this is not normal and this is not acceptable, nothing's going to change.
All right. Let's shift, because this is meant to be about you, and we've not gotten to you yet.
But all I've done is talk, Tack. What are you talking about?
I want to know about, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Woodend, a little tiny town at the foothills of Hanging Rock, of Picnic at Hanging Rock fame. I was both sides of my family have been there for some time, so I was absolutely a local. Both my granddads who fought in the Second World War, their names are on the clock tower in the middle of town. So, yeah, my blood runs thick in that town.
Do you have a lot of siblings?
I've got 3, so I've got one full brother and a half brother and half sister.
Very interesting. Okay, are they in the industry at all?
No, I am the only person in my industry. God knows where it came from. Look, I started acting when I was 5.
Do you remember a moment where you were like, oh, this is cool?
I remember being very, very young and knowing if I stood in front of the TV and danced, everyone would look at me because they were looking at the TV. But I'm like, I know my audience, okay? And so and it'd be like, move away. And I'd be back in front of it again going, da, 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 just being looked at. And I loved that from quite a young age. I loved taking on a character. Now, this is going to be a dark pivot. It's no coincidence that shortly after I started being abused, which began when I was under 4, I dived into acting because it allowed me to put on another skin. It allowed me, so the theatre became my safe place. It became the place where I don't have to be me. I don't have to be that little girl who's living with that. I can be anyone I want to be. And in many ways that saved me. That I could have ended up doing or acting out in ways that weren't healthy or helpful or savory. And instead I channeled it into acting, onto taking on other characters. And so I can't remember a time when I didn't love it, when I didn't get and it started with the stage, when I didn't get the thrill of, and I've done it in a couple of different vectors. I've done stand-up comedy and musicals and improvisation, all sorts of bits and pieces. But there was something about that conversation between me and the audience. So me and the other players and the audience, that it was a conversation and being seen. Absolutely. Yeah, being very, very visible in a life where I otherwise felt, and I suppose wanted to be, invisible. I never saw it as a career. It was just something that I love so passionately. And when you find something that you love and you know instinctively that you're good at, it has a positive impact on everything else in your life. It has a positive impact on your relationships, on your education. I did very well in school, and I'm certain that was because I had this thing that made me feel good. So I didn't need anyone to tell me that I was good because I've got this thing and it makes me feel really good. And that was the great gift of acting, reacting. I would like to say you and I were both actors when I was talking about acting. It's about reacting, about being able to tell stories. Storytelling was just such a gift and remains so to this day.
So it never was like, there was never a moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to try to make this a career. It was just, no, I'm just going to keep doing this thing. And I just kept doing this thing.
I just kept doing this thing. So it was all stage work. And then when I studied law at university. Again, I think so I felt good about myself and I was out of home, and I've always had a very keen interest in justice. I wanted to specialise in criminal law, sex crimes against women and children, funnily enough. Again, no coincidence there. But whilst I was at uni, I got an agent just to do a little bit of, because I'd done quite a few professional plays and play readings by that stage and had been told, you've got to, if you want to continue with this, you're going to need agency representation. And I'd been with my agent for 2 days and I got the audition for Neighbours and got that role, which started as 2 weeks and became 11 weeks. And I was doing both uni and Neighbours for it initially. And then when I was offered the contract for a year or 2, it was law, which, as for anyone who studied law, for every tutorial, you've got to do 4 hours of preparation. So I just couldn't make them both work. And I was always determined to go back, but I just never did.
I didn't know that it started as a 2-week role and then it got extended.
It started as just being a fluffy little plaything for Joel and Toadie at a nightclub. How's that fluffy little plaything? And then they liked the character, they gave her a career, and it just extended. And hence Dee Bliss was born, or delivered unto Ramsay Street.
It's always amazing to hear when someone's come on and it's just been like, oh, they're just here for a little moment, and then people have gone, there's something there, let's keep it going, and then it grew and grew and grew. Because how well, outside of the return with Andrea and Dee, how long was the initial stint?
So 4 years. And being hit by the bus was a bit pivotal, was a bit of a turning point for me.
Yeah, because where was that in that timeline?
So that was in 2002, and I finished up in 2003.
And you started on Neighbours
in 99.
Right. So it was like 3/4 of the way through kind of thing.
And that was a big, that was a real wake up call for me, because if I'm honest with you, Tack, I'd kind of reached a point where I've always been a method actor, and that's kind of informed the basis of how I create characters. And it's transformed in multiple ways throughout my career. So I've taken on different styles and learnt more about the craft. But it was always about building a character. And so I was that annoying person who would come in with annotated scripts, and I'd mapped out emotional journeys for each block. And I was using Laban dance methodology so I could physicalize what I was doing. I think if you would ask Scott Major, who, for those who aren't familiar, was one of the initial cast and then has become one of our illustrious directors, I would sometimes arrive to perform a scene and I would dance out the scene that had just happened. Like I had to dance that out so I was physically in the place of delivering that next scene, because we don't shoot chronologically, we shoot out of order. And so I could remember, like, if I've just left this place and I was crying and I was so angry, I've got to come into the next scene with that same energy. So I'm going to dance out that scene and then I come in. So I do all kinds of crazy things like that. And a few years in, I was starting to feel like I wasn't playing a character anymore. I was just playing myself. I'd gotten a little bit lazy in my craft. It was kind of just Madeleine delivering lines with, acknowledgement of storyline.
I have a rebuttal to this, because it's something that basically every actor on Neighbours goes through, in that or any like long-term running thing of, they go, I feel like I'm just playing me. Am I acting anymore? And the reality is, I feel the reality is that no, you are acting, but because you have lived the last few years of their backstory, it's very hard to separate yourself from them, because you've spent nearly as much time being them as you have being you. So of course it feels like you're just doing you, because you kind of are. But it's only when you leave, you step away and you go, oh, I'm not being that person anymore. Like that, I'm not accessing that whole half of my brain that's been doing this other person's life. Yeah.
I think I just felt in myself that I was getting a bit lazy, that I was maybe just phoning it in a bit. And, and we do at times, because it's an intense schedule, and it's shooting. Back in the day, back when I was on the show, it was 48 weeks of the year. Our brains get tired and we start to go, I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to get to set on time.
I don't want to memorize 20 pages for tomorrow and then the next day, the next day.
And I was starting to feel a little bit, there's a lot of hardworking, deserving actors who would give their right tooth to be doing what I'm doing right now. And maybe it's time for me to switch it up a little bit. And I think the bus accident happened at a pivotal time. It made me really reassess things, because of course it smashed up my face. And I think I'd started to lean into believing that my greatest value was the way I looked. Because as you know, when you're on a very visible show like Neighbours, a big part of it is the publicity and the photo shoots and the way you present on the show. And I think I was starting to invest in this, because when I was hit by the bus, when I saw my face for the first time, and it was pretty badly smashed up. I'd fractured my skull in 3 places and lost all the skin down one side of my face, and broken teeth, and burst all the capillaries in my eyes. They were red. My face was swollen up to twice its normal size. It was all black and blue. I didn't recognize myself. And my first thought was, it's over. This thing that has kept me alive for as long as I can remember, that has been the foundation of everything I believe in myself, I'll never work again. unless I'm playing the Phantom from Phantom of the Opera with the half a mask on his face, or I'm in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I really leaned into that, and that was deadening, Tack. I mean, my whole identity was stripped away from me, and it wasn't an identity I was ready to let go of. I was all of 21 years old, and I had a real dark night of the soul in hospital that night, and really sat with myself and asked why was I an actor? Was it so that I could, as I'd always believed, tell people stories, because everyone's story deserves being told, and even if it was just half an hour on a weeknight, let someone in the audience walk in my shoes, to see the world through a different set of eyes, to have an experience they might not otherwise have access to? Or was it so I could look sexy on the cover of TV Week? I'd become an actor to be a storyteller, and I'd survived. I had to look at it as a wake-up call that 98% of people who are hit physically by a speeding bus don't make it. Of that 2%, the majority end up with lifelong physical or mental injuries. And I've got some broken teeth and a dodgy eyebrow, and I suffer migraines, and when I'm tired, I stutter. So that for me was a real wake-up call to acknowledge that if I'm going to invest only in my appearance, the way I look makes up maybe 2% of who I am. And if I'm going to dilute and shred and strip away all of my hopes and all of my dreams, all of my ambitions, all my love and all my passion, all my knowledge and knowledge that's yet to come to me, and curiosity, if I'm going to throw all of that away and just show up for that 2%, then how much am I missing out on, and how much is the world missing out on? And that made me take a moment to go, okay, so where do I want to be in a few years from now? And I decided this is time for me to move on. This is time for me to tackle, yes, if I'm going to be in this career, that I could direct, I could write, I could be a grip, I could learn to be a cameraman, which when I did learn to, when I returned to Neighbours, I did my directing attachment, my camera attachment, and wrote and all those kinds of things, to expand my knowledge. I was my curiosity about the world was reignited, and so if I'm going to return to this career, it needs to shift, it needs to change, it needs to transform, and that's what I did. And so when I was next offered a contract renewal, I just said, look, thank you kindly. I've loved my time here. I've learned so much, but now it's time to see what happens next. Kudos to the writers, because they extracted Dee in such an incredible way that she died on her wedding day to Toadie, and
in another motor vehicle accident,
and was decapitated. If anyone who's seen the footage, because of course it was a crash test dummy, and the head went one way, the car went the other, and then it set Ryan's character Toadie on such an incredible journey that the loss of Dee was pivotal for him, and it informed his storyline going forward. And that in itself was a really beautiful thing. Of course, till I came back 17 years later. But what a way to go on your wedding day.
Oh, of course. So what was it like immediately after you left Neighbours? How did the world feel?
So I went off to America. I've always written music, and I dabbled in that for a little while. But I think I realized there was a couple of things happened, not all of them savory. And that again was a wake up call that, hang on, I know what my true calling is. Let's not dive into any cliches. So I came back to Australia, and look, I was very lucky. I had a situation which I suppose set up a false sense of security, where I got the next two roles that I auditioned for, and they were both fabulous, really challenging roles. And then did have a stretch where I was auditioning but not getting anything. But in that, I started having kids. Started having babies in the middle of it. And that was, again, as you know, very hard to make the two worlds meet. Very, very difficult to marry intense filming schedules with children, where there might not necessarily be a lot of hands on deck to help you out, especially when your partner also has a very big career. So that presented a whole new set of challenges, but I did make a point of only auditioning for characters that I felt were not a replication of what I'd done before, that
Yeah.
that pushed me into a position of I need to learn, I need to research, I need to make myself uncomfortable again in order to make
Yeah.
peace with the decisions that they're making, that really extended not just my ability and range, but also my appreciation of the human condition. One of my favourite characters was Mel on the Foxtel series Satisfaction, which was about sex workers, and she was a high-end escort, and that was such a pivot that I came to that with my own set of biases and understandings and beliefs. And in order to breathe life into the character written in the character description, it forced me to look beyond what I believed was right and wrong, to step into that grey area, to understand what someone's motivation was. And for me, no matter how challenging the character was, it was about finding that little nugget, that little kernel that I could appreciate, that in my own life I understood, and it could just be the tiniest little thing, whether it was a favorite color or a food that we both liked, some little thing that allowed me to step into that character fully. So over several years, I'd really got to extend my range. And the first big show I did out of Neighbours was called Big Reef. And my character was a yacht captain who, up in the Whit Sundays, who was also a professional diver. So it was a character who didn't get to wear makeup. I had to cut my hair short and dye it red, and was just out in the sun and extremely physical, and a lot of big drone shots of my character, managing the yacht and then diving into the ocean, swimming to shore and things like that. And that was, even the way she spoke and her physicality was so different to Dee, that I went, wow, oh yeah, that's what this is like. That's what it's like to step out of the cliche or the stereotype and embody another character. And I love that now. Sometimes I will reflect on some of the shows I've done and people will say, oh, were you in that? I get that a lot with Mel, that there was such a disconnect between Dee and Mel, the character in Satisfaction, and I had a super sharp black bob, or a pob, like Posh Beckham's haircut that was short at the back and long at the front, and it was black, and the way she spoke and her physicality was so different to Dee that people never didn't join the dots. And I went, I love that. That means that Madeleine isn't showing up in this picture. The character is showing up. So it's been an interesting journey, Tack. I have always been a big believer in continuing to train. So I would go on and do drop-in acting courses wherever I could. I taught a lot and still do. Young people, adults. I did stand-up comedy for a long stretch.
Actually, talk about that, because that's like I'll get on stage in front of 10,000 people and I can talk to them. But if you tell me I've got to do a stand-up, and I do that knowing that, okay, there's 10,000 people. If I can probably say a joke here and I can get one to laugh. And if I get one, then it's okay. But how is that experience? Like, what was the first time you went and did stand-up?
I started by doing some improvisation. So when I was in America, I trained at Second City, which is the home of Saturday Night Live. And I'd gone into that just to do some pure acting courses, and then saw these improvisation courses. I went, wow, that's really interesting. And that shifted my approach to character. That no, you can improvise an entire day in a character's life, and suddenly that resets how you approach how they move, how they what their worldview is, who they love, why they love people, who they hate, why they hate them, what their favorite food is, do they like coffee, all those kinds of little tiny details. Improvisation is such a great foundation to work from. And on the back of that, I started doing Whose Line Is It Anyway style shows at LA Improv.
Oh, cool.
For anyone who's seen that improvised comedy series. And when I came back to Australia, I found a local improvisation group and started working with them. And most of my cohort on that stage were also doing stand-up comedy. So I started going to stand-up shows and watching stand-up. And then I just decided I'm just going to do a 5-minute set. And I got on the stage fully aware that people would recognize me as Dee from Neighbours, because my period on Neighbours was very much one of the heyday of Neighbours. Very pleased to know that the audience's second favourite moment out of beyond Scott and Charlene's wedding was my death. So I don't know what that says. But I knew that there would be an appetite and a curiosity about me. And so I did a set about being a soap actor, which kind of extended a bit. I'd talk a bit about Neighbours and just riff about things that were happening in my life. I did a full headline 50-minute set about the bus accident, after the bus accident, when I still had bandages on my face. And that for me was therapy. I got to pull it all out and laugh at it.
Yeah.
And so it just had its own trajectory. I started getting booked unexpectedly. And when I finished on Neighbours, it was such an important antidote to me from stepping into, I suppose, the fear of, well, this is what I do and this is who I am, and almost like diva-like behaviour, but this is what I'm used to, and I'm used to, people coming and putting a dressing gown on me and making me a cup of tea, and this is what I'm used to. It was such a rebirth and a re-entry into the real world to make myself vulnerable, because comedy is the ultimate vulnerability, because you're getting up on stage and everything is stripped away and you're ripping open your chest cavity going, please laugh, please laugh, please laugh. And you fail and it's the lowest of the lows. And if you succeed, it's the highest of the highs.
Yeah, there's nothing more real than the silence of the silence after a punchline.
When you die and it's like, do I scramble and try to recover it, or do I just move on? And that in itself is just such a craft.
So we have a Patreon, and one of the levels of the Patreon allows them to have some questions for our guests.
Excellent.
And I apologize to everyone that we didn't get to the second coming of Dee and Andrea.
What can we say? Okay, so, I died on my wedding day, had an horrific car accident, got washed off to a cliff, never to be seen again until I returned 17 years later, but I wasn't actually myself. I was actually my evil twin, who went on to have Toadie's miracle love child because he'd had cancer and was currently infertile. But then the real me came back from the dead and confronted myself, and I had a fight with myself and threw myself off a cliff. And locked myself in a dungeon. There you go. How often do you get to say that? Split personality disorder.
That was an incredible summation. If you hadn't done that string of sentences before, which I feel like you may have not, that was incredible.
It's just so fresh and so real for me. And I directed those episodes. So there you go, Jack.
True. That helps. That definitely helps. Okay, Kayla asks, who from your original Neighbours days did you miss having on set in the second coming of Dee and Andrea?
Daniel McPherson, because Joel and Dee's storyline was what kicked off the whole thing. And Harold, because he was such a pivotal character. He wasn't on the show when I returned. Oh my goodness, the list could go on. But I think that the more important question is, who did I love getting to return to? And that was obviously Alan Fletcher and Ryan and Jackie. It was like coming home.
This is from Ruth Della. I found Andrea quite fascinating. Did you ever get a handle on what you thought her backstory might be beyond what we saw on screen? Also, if there could have been a secret triplet, what kind of personality would you have liked them to have?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we've got Dee, who was loving and giving and generous to a fault, who had safe attachment because she'd had a functional adopted family that took care of her. Then we've got broken Dee, who's rough as nails, being brought up by her shoestrings by Kerry Armstrong's fabulous iteration of Heather, her mother, who was full of love but just didn't really know how to deliver it in a healthy way, so did not have a healthy attachment. So goodness, the other character in between would probably be, let's see, touching on both of those two things, a corporate lawyer. That's what we needed to rock in. Oh, I love that, the triplet. My way of getting into Andrea, because she was a tricky character, was instead of saying ask, she said arcs. Didn't ask you that. And that just informed everything. As soon as I had that, I was like, there she is. As opposed to Dee, who would say, I just asked you a question. Could you tell me what's going on? I didn't ask you any questions. I don't have to answer your questions. I don't want to talk about it, all right? So just get out of my face. So the two of them, that was the pivot.
I love that thing of like, and I feel like it's a common thing amongst actors. Characters can be so defined by a word, and that becomes our access into it. It's like, oh, what was that character like? And there's just a word. And oh, there it is.
And jaw placement, just the saying of the word arcs as opposed to ask, which is a circular, like slides off the tongue and returns. Arcs is angular, makes my jaw jut forward. And that straight away, I know if anyone can see it, but that straight away became Andrea, as opposed to the jaw sitting back softly, which was Dee. It's like that tiny little physical thing. And hitting the nose, that was an Andrea gesture, that just doing that, we're talking about arcs, just, touching my nose. Those tiny little things that it doesn't require a great big limp or anything obvious to signpost this is a whole person. This is a whole being.
You've kind of answered Craig's questions, but what was it like returning almost 15 years later and sharing scenes with Ryan Maloney again? I guess maybe to refine that question of like, what was it like the first time stepping into the role? Well, you're stepping in as Andrea playing Dee, but it's kind of confusing. But did it all come back in the relationships of the characters come back?
Oh, absolutely, because the set hadn't changed. It was exactly the same, and most of the crew was still there. And the green room still had the same couches, which had been there from the original Prisoner days. And I think there was still red wine from the character who then played B had spilled it on the couch. But I think it's been transformed significantly since. So it was very fluid and very easy to step back into that, despite the fact by that stage I'd had 6 kids, Ryan had 2, that our lives had changed so much to find that little nugget of sensibility.
It's incredible because it's such a unique experience. I mean, how many, it would probably be on one hand the amount of actors who have left the show and come back after more than a decade to step in as the same roles, fulfilling a similar sort of relationship dynamic and that kind of thing.
It was such a gift.
What a unique experience that you have.
It was such a gift, and one that I'm endlessly grateful for. And while I have this opportunity, there's something that's really that has sat with me for a long time that I grieved, and that's when Neighbours went through its first finale. I was asked for Dee to return, and that was the same time I was going down to Victoria to wear the wire and face off with my predator. And I'm in a different world. I can't do that. I was so raw and so vulnerable at that moment. I'd had to do so much work psychologically to prepare myself to do that. I couldn't layer in. And I knew how I would be in that space, that I was so spiky and it was like my skin had been ripped off. I couldn't afford to show up in that way on something that I wanted to do. And I feared, I think there might have been some misunderstanding on production level that I simply didn't want to do it. That was never the case. I just couldn't say why, because I was about to undertake a police sting. So that little message I'm sending out to the ether.
The life you've led is so intrinsically unique, of not only the Neighbours thing, so the actor thing of that experience being unique, but the police sting and which is something you see in a movie, and how many people have been involved in that kind of thing, to also then being hit by a bus. You've got you're not allowed to go out on a stormy day because lightning. It's the next unique experience. It's going to happen.
How exciting! I'm curious to see what the next chapter is going to be. I kind of think that these experiences come to me because I've always just been open. And there's been plenty of bad experiences and there've been rapturous, incredible experiences. And it's like, okay, the one thing that keeps driving me is storytelling, which is interesting because, as you know, and anyone would see, our theatre scene in Australia is being pummeled to the ground with the cost of living, and yet storytelling is still so pivotal and so important. So I'm actually just about to kick off a production of Streetcar named Desire up here in this area, because I thought long and hard about what storytelling means and and how it's more often than not an opportunity to amplify situations that we're all tackling in our and shining a mirror back on society without it sounding too highfalutin. And I found it, so living up here in Byron, we have really high rates of homelessness. We've got some of the highest rates of single parent, single mum families in the state. We've got really high statistics on domestic violence. And I saw this opportunity to, so as we know, so often situations we've encountered have been playing out forever, and they just become visible at different points in time. And I thought, what an opportunity to lead into a classic that just goes to show that these issues we are confronting as a society are immortal and more needs to be done to correct them. And so I approached a local theatre company and said, the Banglo Theatre Company, and said, look, I'd really love to put on a production of Streetcar Named Desire. It was written in the 40s, but it's all about homelessness and the consequences of people being a little bit outside the norm. Blanche's first husband was actually gay and took his own life, and domestic violence. The chemistry between Stella and Stanley is built upon the physical push and pull between them, even when she's pregnant. And for Blanche, who, due to circumstances beyond her control, is seen as a fallen woman who is now homeless and has nowhere to go. And even though it was written in the 40s, if you kind of look at the context of the construction of Blanche, she's perimenopausal. She's like, so much of the push and pull that she's experiencing is a woman who's going through a significant hormonal shift, hormonal change. And I've been very lucky that the company has jumped on board, and we've engaged numerous actors who currently aren't able to get employment in the professional realm, with the intention to continue telling these stories, like making it local stories on the stage. So it's such a beautiful opportunity to continue telling stories in a way that maybe, I suppose, once you endeavour on a professional career, you don't think you'll return to. But like the stand-up comedy, like the improvisation, like becoming an author, like doing podcasting and things, once you're a storyteller, once it's in your blood, there's no escaping it. And so you just find different ways to do it.
All right, there's a couple more of these. Was there a moment where you genuinely forgot which twin you were playing on set between Andrea and Dee?
No, I was just too.
Maybe David Trotter. No, that could be the whole answer. How shocked were you when you were asked to return to Neighbours?
Oh my goodness, I loved it. When I sat down in Jason Herbertson's office and he said, "Okay, this is what we're going to do," I just went, "It's so unbelievable that I believe in it. I'm in." And so we just went, no holds barred.
This isn't a question. I wanted to say, when you were playing Andrea and Dee, you did an amazing job and I loved every moment. That's from Jen B.
Oh, thank you, Jen B. That's lovely.
And the other question was from Lauren Brown, just to shout them out. Thank you to our Patreons. If you want to ask questions to our guests, join our Patreon, because you get early access to who they are and get to ask them questions. So thank you for them.
Thank you. And if you're in Byron region at the end of October, beginning of November, please check out Banglo Theatre Company, Streetcar Named Desire.
I mean, if I book a gig between now and then that Amy and I can afford to come to Byron and watch it, we will definitely be there.
Yes.
But thank you so much for joining us, Madeleine.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Tack, and to everyone listening out there. It has been such a delight. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening.
How good is Madeleine West? We literally went from dissecting the logistics of a toddler number 3 blowout to wearing police wires and rewriting national legislation. Also, I am never complaining about getting up for a 6 a.m. call ever again, now that I know she was doing stand-up comedy in sticky pubs at 9 months pregnant. Madeleine talked about that terrifying bus accident being the ultimate wake-up call. The moment that made her completely reevaluate her identity and walk away from a massive TV contract to try something new. I want to know who is listening right now. Should I say, still listening? Jump in the comments on YouTube or Spotify and tell me, what was your wake-up call moment, if you've had one? What was that sliding doors moment that completely shifted your life or career trajectory? And just drop it in the comments below. Pretty please. Thank you. Now, if you got something out of this chat, the absolute best way to support the show is to hit the subscribe button and or leave a review. And if you don't do it, I'm going to hire my own evil twin to ambush Tom in the studio, fight him, and throw him off a cliff just to boost the ratings. Don't make me resort to soap opera tactics. Hit subscribe. A massive thank you to our Patreon community as well for keeping the lights on. If you want to listen or to watch every single episode absolutely ad-free, plus get all the behind-the-scenes chaos, click the link in the show notes for a 7-day free trial. And a huge shout out as well to our Patreon executive producers, Carl B. and newbie, Craig Hughes. Thanks for being absolute legends. All right, I'll see you next week. That was Madeleine West, and I am just Takaya Honda.